I was 22 when I married Amy, the girl I'd loved since middle school. We'd grown up together, neighbors, classmates, best friends turned soulmates. She was my first everything. We went to prom together, graduated side by side, and by the time we both landed our first real jobs, we decided to take the next step. Our wedding was simple, heartfelt, and full of hope. Everyone said we were the perfect match, the kind of couple that makes it. For the first 2 years, life felt like something out of a dream. We were both building our careers, saving for our future, and dreaming of starting a family. I thought we were solid. Sure, we had our disagreements, but nothing that seemed out of the ordinary. I loved her fiercely, and I believed naively that love was enough. Then, out of nowhere, things shifted. She became distant, quiet, cold. At first, I thought it was stress. Maybe work had worn her down. I tried to give her space, be supportive, bring home her favorite takeout, offer weekend getaways, just the two of us. I kept asking, "Are you okay?" And she'd brush it off with a soft smile and a mumbled, "I'm fine." But we weren't fine. A few weeks before our 3rd anniversary, Amy handed me a manila envelope with divorce papers inside. My heart sank like a stone. I remember the moment too vividly. Her eyes avoided mine, her hands trembling slightly. "I'm done," she said. No yelling, no explanation, just done. I begged for clarity, pleaded to go to counseling, asked if I had done something wrong. All she said was, "I'm not in love with you anymore." That was it. It broke me. I wanted to fight for us, but I knew when someone checks out like that, there's nothing left to fight for. We had no kids, very few shared assets, and no legal battles to slow the process. Within weeks, it was over, just like that. She moved to another city, changed her number, shut down every line of communication. I was left in the ruins, holding a ring that no longer meant anything and a heart I didn't recognize anymore. But what truly gutted me, more than the divorce, was how quickly my family seemed to vanish too. My parents, my sister, they all disappeared like smoke. Calls went unanswered, messages ignored. I thought maybe they were giving me space, but that space stretched into silence and then into a wall I couldn't break through. I tried visiting, knocked on my parents' door only to be told they weren't home, even when I could see my father's truck in the driveway. My sister blocked me on social media. Every attempt to reconnect ended in nothing. It didn't make sense. They had always been so involved in our relationship. My mom adored Amy, or so I thought. My dad had walked her down the aisle when her own father couldn't. My sister used to call her the sister I never had. So why the sudden exile? I was drowning in confusion, grief, and rejection from both my wife and my family. I spiraled. I quit my job, spent months in bed, lost weight, lost interest in everything. I felt like I was grieving a death, except the corpse was my life. I remember sitting on the floor of my empty apartment one night, staring at old wedding photos, trying to piece together what went wrong. But the truth was, I had no answers. Just silence and shadows. If not for my closest friends, true friends, I don't know where I'd be. They held me when I cried, fed me when I forgot to eat, reminded me that my story wasn't over, and slowly, painfully, I began to believe them. This was the end of something, but maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something else, and I had no idea how deep that rabbit hole would go. After Amy left and my family turned their backs on me, I spent years in a haze of confusion and quiet heartbreak. The silence from the people I trusted most felt louder than any fight. I kept asking myself, was I really that easy to discard? For nearly a year, I lived like a ghost in my own skin, going through the motions, breathing but not living. Every time I passed by a family-owned diner or saw a couple holding hands in the grocery store, it felt like a stab to the chest. Love, family, connection, it all felt like a cruel illusion. But then, somewhere in the fog, a spark returned. It started small. A friend brought over takeout and said, "You need a new project." That same night, I sat down with a notebook and sketched the idea for a restaurant, a place that felt like home, cozy, warm, welcoming, everything my life hadn't been in years. Opening a restaurant had always been a dream I shelved for someday, but now I had nothing left to lose, no family obligations, no one else to consider, so I began. I dipped into what little savings I had left, took out a small loan, and started calling everyone I knew who had even a shred of business knowledge. My friends stepped up in ways that still bring tears to my eyes. One helped me write a business plan, another connected me with a local investor, a third helped design the logo. Every step felt like breathing life into something new. Not just a business, but a version of me that wasn't broken anymore. The hardest decision was what to name it. I kept flipping back to old memories, old conversations, and then I remembered something from years before. My parents had once said if I ever opened a restaurant, I should call it Hearth and Table. I used to love that idea. I still did, so I gave them that. Even after they abandoned me, I gave them a place in the story I was rewriting. I guess that was my way of saying, you don't get to define me, but I'll honor the parts of you that shaped me. It took years, 3 to be exact, but Hearth and Table opened its doors on a quiet Thursday in the middle of spring. The first night, we barely filled 6 tables, but by the third week, word of mouth had already started working its magic. People loved it. The food, the atmosphere, the heart behind it all. It became a sanctuary, not just for customers, but for me. I'd work 14-hour days, pour every ounce of myself into every detail, and go home exhausted but proud. And then, one evening at a local charity event, everything changed again. That's when I met her. Her name was Sarah. She was standing near the dessert table, laughing with a friend. I overheard her complimenting our bread pudding. It was one of the few things I personally learned to perfect in the kitchen. I walked over, nervous, introduced myself as the owner. Her smile was kind, effortless. She said, "Well, you've got great taste." We started talking, then texting, then seeing each other regularly, and before I knew it, love wasn't something I feared anymore. It was something I was open to. Sarah didn't ask about my past right away. When she finally did, she didn't flinch. She held my hand and said, "You don't owe me perfection. You just owe me honesty." 3 years later, I married her in the garden behind our second restaurant. It was simple, small, and real. And now, 10 years later, we have a son, an 8-year-old bundle of energy and joy named Ethan. He's everything I once thought I'd lost forever. My company grew from one restaurant to a hospitality group. We now own a chain of hotels and eateries across 3 states. I became the CEO of my own story. And for the first time in a long time, I was proud of who I saw in the mirror. But success has a funny way of drawing out ghosts. And after nearly 2 decades of silence, my past came knocking again. Loud and uninvited. It had been nearly 20 years since I last laid eyes on my parents or sister. 20 years of birthdays missed, holidays spent in silence, and unanswered calls that eventually stopped coming. I had mourned them the way you mourn people who are still alive, grieving not their death, but their absence. I had let go of ever hearing from them again, until the day they showed up at my office. It was a Tuesday morning. I remember that clearly because Tuesdays were always busy. Weekly planning, staffing meetings, back-to-back calls. I was mid-sentence with my assistant when she interrupted nervously saying, your family is here, in the lobby." My stomach dropped. For a second, I thought she meant Sarah and Ethan, but that didn't make sense. Sarah was at work, and Ethan was in school. I asked, confused, "My what?" She hesitated. "Your parents and your sister." I froze. I hadn't heard those names spoken aloud in years. My first instinct was to send security to escort them out. I wasn't ready, but something inside me stopped me. After everything they'd done, I still needed answers. So I walked into the lobby. There they were, my mother, with graying hair and a hopeful smile that felt artificial. My father, hands folded behind his back like he was rehearsing dignity. And my sister, arms crossed, expression unreadable. They greeted me like nothing had happened, like we hadn't spent 2 decades apart. "You've done so well for yourself," my mother said, eyes gleaming. "We saw your interview last week. So proud of you." My father chimed in, "You're making the family name proud." The family name? The same name they abandoned me under? I kept my voice steady. "Why are you here?" They looked at each other, then back at me. "We thought, maybe it's time to reconnect. We've missed so much. We'd love to meet your wife and your son." The audacity of that request almost made me laugh. They acted like they had been the ones left behind, like I had shut them out instead of the other way around. I told them I was working and didn't have time for a surprise reunion, but they pushed. They didn't want to leave. And something in me, maybe curiosity, maybe anger, decided to let them talk. We sat in the lobby. I kept my guard up, arms folded tight across my chest, and then came the truth. They told me Amy had been cheating on me, with Carl, my cousin, the one I had always despised for his arrogance and entitlement, the one my father treated like royalty simply because his mother had died young, and his father, the founder of the family business, held all the power. My family hadn't just known about the affair, they'd helped cover it up. They said they were protecting the family, that my uncle had demanded they cut me off or else they'd lose access to their grandson, Amy's child. A child, I now learned, was mine. Yes, I had a daughter. They never told me, never sent a letter, never gave me a chance to be a father. And now, 20 years later, they sat there sipping complimentary coffee from my lobby like this was just a minor misunderstanding. I couldn't breathe. The room spun. My ears rang with the echoes of all the birthdays I never celebrated, the lullabies I never sang, the questions I never got to answer, for a daughter who had no idea I even existed. I have to go, I said finally, rising to my feet. I need time. They begged. My sister said, "We named your restaurant, remember? We helped build your dream." It was almost laughable, as if suggesting a name decades ago gave them a claim on my life. I looked at them, calm and cold. You didn't build any of this. You left me to drown, and I survived without you. And I walked away, but even as I stepped into the elevator, my heart was breaking all over again, not just for me this time, but for the daughter I never knew I had. The moment I left that lobby, the world felt heavier. Like gravity had doubled, like I was being pulled into the weight of a life that was never mine to begin with. I sat in my office with the blinds drawn and lights off, my phone turned face down on the desk. My parents' words echoed over and over in my head. You have a daughter. For 20 years they had kept her from me. Her name wasn't even mentioned, just that she believed Carl was her father. I stared at the family photos on my wall, Sarah, Ethan, and me. Smiling, warm, whole. But in that moment, I realized that smile I wore had always been missing a piece I didn't know I had lost. I didn't tell Sarah right away, not because I was hiding anything, but because I didn't know how to say it. How do you explain to your wife that your ex-wife cheated, had a baby with your cousin, let you walk away thinking you had no children? And now, you might have a daughter out there who doesn't even know you exist. That night, I barely slept. I kept seeing a little girl's face I'd never seen, a laugh I never heard, milestones I missed, her first steps, her first word, her first heartbreak. It felt like mourning a ghost of a life that could have been. The next day, I told Sarah everything. We sat at the kitchen table, sunlight pouring through the window, Ethan's backpack still slung over the back of a chair. I braced myself for shock, for anger, maybe even disbelief. But Sarah just listened. Her eyes stayed locked on mine. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, her voice was steady but quiet. Do you want to find her? I nodded before I even realized it. Sarah reached for my hand. Then we'll find her. That was the moment I knew, truly knew, I had married the right woman. We didn't know where to start. My parents had refused to give me a name, but during their rambling conversation in the lobby, they'd mentioned she was in college, somewhere out of state. It wasn't much, but it was a clue. Sarah suggested starting online, social media, school registries, anything we could cross-reference. I asked my assistant discreetly for help. She's smart, resourceful, and within hours she had found a lead. A girl named Emily, enrolled at a private university in Oregon, with a birth date that matched the timeline. Her last name wasn't mine, of course. It was Carl's, but her face. There was something about her smile that made my heart ache. I stared at her Instagram profile for what felt like hours. Every photo felt like a chapter from a book I was never allowed to read. Graduation pics, friends, campus life, and one post in particular, her standing between Amy and Carl. Family weekend, the caption read. My stomach turned. Sarah stood behind me, reading over my shoulder. That's her, she whispered. We didn't send a message. Not yet. How do you tell someone that everything they've known for 20 years has been a lie? I needed time to think. That night, Ethan came home from school, dumped his backpack, and hugged me like always. And I hugged him tighter than I ever had, because now I knew what it meant to miss out on moments like that, and I wasn't going to let that happen again. Not if I could help it. In the silence that followed, I sat in the dark living room with my laptop open and Emily's photo staring back at me. She was mine, and I had to find a way to tell her that. Even if it shattered her world, the truth was all I had left to offer. It took me 3 more days to work up the courage to write the message. 3 days of hovering over my keyboard, typing out drafts and deleting them, wondering if anything I said could ever be enough. How do you tell someone you're their father, and that you didn't even know they existed? Sarah sat with me every evening, helping me word it carefully. Not too much, not too little. Just the truth. Gentle, but honest. On a quiet Sunday morning with Ethan out at a friend's birthday party and the house still wrapped in silence, I finally clicked send. I messaged Emily through Instagram. No grand reveal, no drama, just, "Hi Emily, I hope this doesn't scare you or upset you. My name is Nathan. I know this might come as a shock, but I believe I may be your biological father. I'm not here to disrupt your life, only to share the truth and give you space to ask whatever questions you may have. I only just found out you existed, and I want you to know that if you ever want to talk, I'm here. No pressure, just honesty. Take your time." Then I closed my laptop and stared out the window for a long time, trying not to let my heart break all over again. The next few days were agonizing. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped. Every notification made my stomach flip. But there was no response. I kept asking myself, what if I made it worse? What if she shows the message to Amy or Carl and I'm painted as some unstable stranger? What if she never replies at all? Sarah kept reminding me, you did what you had to do. You gave her the truth. Now it's hers to hold. And then, 5 days later, her name appeared on my phone. Emily had replied. It was a short message. Careful, hesitant. "Hi Nathan, I got your message. I don't know what to say. I talked to my mom about it. She didn't want to say much at first, but eventually she admitted it's true. I don't really know how to feel. I need time, but I don't hate you, and I don't want you to think that. I'll message again when I'm ready." I read those words over and over, my hands trembling, eyes burning. She didn't hate me, and that, somehow, was everything. I showed the message to Sarah, and she immediately started crying. "She's open to you," she whispered. "That's all we can ask for." That night, we sat at the dinner table with Ethan, laughing at his stories from school, and for the first time in days, the world felt a little more stable beneath my feet. I didn't reply to Emily right away. I wanted her to know I respected her pace, but I did write a short note the next morning. "Thank you, Emily. I'm here whenever you're ready, always." A week passed, then another, and just as I was starting to worry again, she messaged me back. "Would you be open to meeting sometime soon, maybe in person?" I showed Sarah. We both exhaled like we'd been holding our breath for weeks. We started planning the trip. Emily lived across the country in Oregon, where she attended college. She didn't want to fly out. She didn't have the money, and besides, she wasn't ready to leave her routines behind. So we agreed to fly there. It was surreal, buying tickets to meet your own daughter for the first time at 20 years old. Sarah packed carefully. She kept saying, "This isn't just a visit, it's history." And she was right. The night before our flight, I couldn't sleep. I stood in Ethan's doorway, watching him breathe, thinking about all the moments I'd missed with Emily. Birthday parties, school plays, scraped knees, bedtime stories. And I whispered to the quiet air, "I'm sorry I wasn't there, but I'm here now." Tomorrow I'd meet my daughter for the very first time, and I didn't know what would happen, but I knew I'd be walking into that meeting not as a stranger, not as a man full of regret, but as a father trying to rebuild something real, even if it took the rest of my life. The flight to Oregon was quiet. Sarah held my hand the entire way, occasionally glancing over at me with a soft smile that said everything without words. I had barely slept the night before, and now, 35,000 feet in the air, my thoughts were spiraling again. What if she changed her mind? What if she only wanted closure, not connection? What if she saw me and felt nothing? But underneath all that anxiety was something else too. Hope, and that hope was stronger. When we landed in Portland, the air was crisp and the clouds hung low over the mountains. We rented a car and drove an hour to her college town. My palms were sweaty the whole ride, and I kept checking my phone, rereading Emily's last message. "Let's meet at the coffee shop near campus. 2 p.m., just you and me at first, if that's okay." Of course it was okay. I would have done anything to make this easier for her. At exactly 1:55 p.m., I stood outside the small cafe she'd picked, heart pounding like I was 17 again on a first date. Sarah gave me a reassuring squeeze on the shoulder and walked down the block, giving us space. I stepped inside. The place smelled like cinnamon and espresso, and soft indie music played overhead. And then, I saw her. Emily. She was sitting by the window in a green hoodie, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun. She looked nervous, her fingers tapping against the paper cup in front of her. And when our eyes met, I stopped breathing for a second. She looked like Amy, but she also looked like me. Same eyes, same awkward half smile. I approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Emily?" I said softly. She stood up. "Hi, Nathan." We didn't hug, we didn't cry, we just sat. And for the first few minutes we talked like strangers, because in many ways we were. She asked about my life now, about Sarah, about Ethan. I told her about the business, about our home back in Colorado, about how terrified I was writing that first message. She listened, quietly, attentively. Then she asked the question I'd been dreading. "Why didn't you fight for me?" My throat tightened. I had rehearsed 1,000 answers, but none of them felt good enough. "I didn't know you existed," I said. "I swear, Emily, your mom never told me. I didn't find out until 3 weeks ago." Her eyes searched mine, and for a moment I thought she didn't believe me. Then she nodded, slowly. "She admitted that," she whispered, said she thought it was for the best, that you didn't need the drama, that Carl was already in place. I bit my lip to keep from swearing out loud. I wanted to scream. Instead, I just said, "You deserved the truth. I deserved the truth, and I hate that it was kept from both of us." She blinked fast, and I saw her jaw clench. "I feel like my whole life's been a lie," she said, voice breaking. "All those years. Birthdays, holidays, family dinners. I thought Carl was my dad. And now I can't stop wondering what my life would have looked like if I had known you." I reached across the table cautiously. "We can't change the past, Emily, but if you want to, we can start something new. No pressure, no expectations, just honesty." She looked at my hand, then she reached out and took it. Her fingers were trembling. "I'd like that," she said. We sat like that for a while, just holding hands in the middle of a crowded cafe. No one else in the room knew what was happening, but for us, it felt like the world had paused. Later, I introduced her to Sarah and Ethan. It was awkward at first, of course, but Emily was kind and Sarah was warm, and Ethan, bless his heart, just smiled and said, "So I guess I have a big sister now." Emily laughed, and I saw something soften in her eyes. That night, we all had dinner together at a local diner. Burgers, milkshakes, and more questions than we could answer. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And after 20 years of silence, that was more than I ever thought I'd get. The morning after we met Emily, I woke up in the hotel room with a heaviness in my chest I couldn't quite shake. The night before had gone better than I could have ever hoped for. But now that the dust had settled, so had the questions. Big ones. Questions I hadn't dared to voice during our first dinner. Questions about what she'd been told and what she'd been denied. Sarah stirred beside me, her hand resting gently on my chest. "You okay?" she asked groggily. "Yeah," I whispered, just thinking. She sat up, brushing her hair back. "She seems like a really good kid." "She is," I said, which makes this whole thing even harder. She deserves more than the twisted version of the truth she's been living. Later that morning, Emily invited us to the small apartment she shared with 2 other students. It was cozy and cluttered with textbooks, laundry baskets, and the smell of cheap coffee. We brought breakfast, bagels, juice, and fresh fruit, and sat at her tiny dining table while Ethan chatted with one of her roommates in the living room. After a while, Emily leaned back in her chair and looked at me. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said. "Of course. When you and Mom were together, was it happy?" Before it all fell apart, the question caught me off guard. I hadn't expected her to want to go there, not yet, but maybe she needed to. Maybe it was part of untangling everything. "For a while," I said honestly. "We were high school sweethearts, college sweethearts too. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Or, at least I thought it was." Emily nodded slowly, staring down at her plate. "She always made it seem like you just gave up, that you stopped trying, that you walked away when things got tough." I swallowed hard. "That's not what happened." "I know that now," she said quietly, "but it still messes with your head, you know? Learning that the version of your life you were told wasn't even close to the truth." She was trembling slightly, her fingers picking at the corner of her napkin. I wanted to reach out, to pull her into a hug, but I knew this moment was hers to control. "I feel like I don't even know who I am," she admitted. "Everything about my identity, who raised me, who I look like, where I come from, it's all scrambled. Carl wasn't just a bad dad. He was never my dad at all. And Mom? I love her, but I can't even look at her right now." I let out a shaky breath. "Emily, I don't want to replace anyone. I don't want to erase your past, but I do want to be part of your future, whatever that looks like." Tears welled up in her eyes, and this time she didn't stop me when I reached across the table to take her hand. "Can we just take it slow?" she asked. "Like maybe call or text a few times a week, maybe visit again next month?" "Anything you want," I said. "I'm here and I'm not going anywhere." Sarah smiled at her from across the table. "We're all in this with you, sweetheart." And then something shifted. Not everything was healed, but something was beginning. As we packed up to leave later that day, Emily walked me to the door and hesitated. "I told my roommates you were an old family friend. I didn't know how to explain it." "That's okay," I said. She looked up at me, her voice small. "Next time you visit, maybe I'll tell them you're my dad." That word, dad, hit me like a wave. Not because I expected it, but because I didn't. I nodded, unable to speak. My eyes burned as I stepped outside into the cold Oregon air. And for the first time in 20 years, I felt something settle inside me. Hope. Real, fragile, beautiful hope. We had barely returned home from our trip to see Emily when something unexpected arrived in the mail. A thick manila envelope addressed in familiar handwriting, tight, neat, and unmistakably my mother's. I froze with the envelope in my hands, standing at the kitchen counter like I was holding a ticking bomb. Sarah walked in, setting down her keys and noticing the look on my face. "What's that?" "It's from my mom," I said quietly. She must have gotten tired of texting and emailing. I hadn't spoken to my parents since the day I had them removed from my office lobby. They hadn't tried to physically show up again, but their messages hadn't stopped. Now it seemed they were turning to an older method, one that couldn't be ignored with a simple swipe. Sarah stayed by my side as I opened it. Inside was a long letter, several pages, handwritten. There was also a photo tucked into the back. My breath caught when I saw it. It was Emily, maybe around 4 years old, sitting in my father's lap, smiling, holding a teddy bear. The caption scrawled in my mother's handwriting, "Thanksgiving, 2008. My knees buckled slightly, and I had to sit down. Sarah placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. The letter began plainly. "No, dear son, no warm opening, just straight into it. We know you hate us. We probably deserve it. But there are things you don't know. Things you should know if you're going to try to build a relationship with Emily." As I read, my mother detailed her version of the past, how they felt pressured by my uncle, how Amy insisted Carl was the real father even before the divorce was finalized, how they believed she had moved on and that I should too. They claimed they kept the truth to protect everyone from further pain. "We told ourselves you would never want to raise a child that wasn't yours." That was a lie. It was easier than facing what we had done. I stopped and closed my eyes, swallowing back the lump forming in my throat. My mother went on to say they never imagined the secret would last this long, that they assumed I would move on, start a new family, and forget. When I succeeded in life, when I became someone seen, it reminded them of all they had missed, that they had been on the wrong side of history, the wrong side of blood. You were always the good one, and we didn't deserve your goodness. The letter ended with a plea, not for forgiveness, but for a chance to meet Emily, to see their granddaughter again. We watched her grow up from a distance through Amy, but we know it's not the same. We missed everything, birthdays, recitals, Christmas mornings, and now we know we missed you too. Sarah squeezed my hand, her voice gentle. How do you feel? I didn't know how to answer. On one hand, part of me felt validated. They admitted it. They knew what they'd done, the lies, the abandonment. On the other hand, it was too little, too late. The photo felt like a punch to the gut. They had been part of her life all along while I had been erased. I placed the letter down and stared out the window, where Ethan was playing basketball in the driveway. I think they mean it, I said, but meaning it doesn't undo it. Sarah nodded. So what now? I don't know, I said, but Emily deserves to choose. She should know that they've been watching from the shadows. Later that night, I sent her a message. Told her about the letter, about the photo. I asked if she wanted to see it, if she wanted to decide what to do with it. Her reply was simple. Send it to me. I want to know everything, even the hard parts. I held my phone close to my chest for a moment, letting her words sink in, even the hard parts. Emily wasn't just reconnecting with me, she was reclaiming her truth, and I would stand by her for every difficult step. The envelope was in the mail the next morning, addressed to Emily with a short note from me tucked inside. I didn't write much, just that I was here if she wanted to talk, and that she didn't owe anyone anything, not even me. 2 days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, but when I listened, my chest tightened. It was Emily. Hey, it's me. I got the photo and the letter. I don't know what I feel yet, but I want to talk. I called her back immediately. Her voice was quiet at first, hesitant, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to trust me. I couldn't blame her. After 20 years of being lied to, I was a stranger wearing the face of her reality unraveling. We talked for an hour. Mostly she asked questions, carefully, nervously. What was I like as a young man? Did I ever suspect I had a child? Why didn't I fight harder to stay connected to the family? I answered everything as honestly as I could. I told her how lost I was after the divorce, how I couldn't understand why everyone I loved had vanished without a word. I told her about the night I sat alone in my apartment, holding the divorce papers, thinking Amy must have hated me deeply to leave so suddenly. I never knew about you, I said. If I had, I would have moved mountains. There was a long pause on the line. Then Emily said something that broke me. I wish you had been there. I wish someone had told me. Her voice cracked at the end of that sentence, and so did I. I closed my eyes, gripping the edge of the table, holding back tears. Not because of what she said, but because I knew that wish could never be fulfilled. I had missed every birthday, every scraped knee, every graduation. I couldn't get that time back, but I could be here now. We spoke again the next night, and the night after. It became a routine, late evening phone calls filled with slow, fragile healing. She told me about her studies, how she loved writing but felt pressured to go into business because it's what Carl wanted, how she never really felt like she fit in, even with him and Amy. He was always watching me like I owed him something, she said once, but you listen. It was the first time I felt hope, a glimmer that maybe, just maybe, I could be the father she never had. One evening, she asked if I would come to her campus for her end-of-semester art show. She had a few pieces on display. I didn't hesitate. Of course, I wouldn't miss it for the world. When Sarah and I arrived, Emily was already there, nervously hovering near her work, 2 paintings and a mixed-media collage that caught everyone's eye. She looked so much like Amy at that age it hurt, but her smile was mine. She introduced us to her friends, beaming. She called Sarah my dad's wife, but with a warmth that suggested she was still deciding what to call her. And when she introduced me, she didn't say, "This is my biological dad." She said, "This is my dad." It took everything in me not to cry on the spot. That night, after the event, she asked if we could take a photo together. Just the two of us, no filters, no rehearsed smiles. She handed her phone to a friend, then leaned her head gently on my shoulder. When the shutter clicked, I realized something powerful. The photo didn't make up for what we lost, but it was proof of what we were building. A new beginning, and sometimes that's all you need. Just a few days after Emily's art show, I was sitting on the back porch with my wife Sarah, drinking coffee while the morning sun filtered through the trees. There was a quiet between us, not the kind that feels heavy, but the kind that says everything's okay, peaceful. Then my phone buzzed. It was an email from my father. Subject line, "We saw the photo." Just that alone made my stomach churn. I opened it with trembling hands. It was short, too short for the years of silence, for the betrayal. Just a few lines of "We're happy for you and Emily," followed by yet another plea to meet. "They miss you," Sarah said softly, reading over my shoulder. I didn't reply. I couldn't. I didn't know how. Later that evening, Emily called. Her voice was tight. "They showed up on campus today." I froze. My grandparents, they were waiting outside the building after one of my classes, said they just wanted to talk. My heart sank. "I'm so sorry, Em. Are you okay?" "I think so," she said, then paused. "They didn't yell or anything. Just asked if I'd seen you, said they wanted to make things right." The audacity. After 2 decades of silence, after keeping me in the dark, now they were showing up in my daughter's life, trying to use her to get to me. "I didn't say much," Emily continued. "I told them I needed time, that I was figuring things out on my own. I didn't let them walk me anywhere. I went straight back inside." "I'm proud of you," I told her, meaning every word. But inside, I was furious. They had no right, not after everything. Later that night, Sarah and I talked it over. She was quiet at first, then said something that stuck with me. "They don't want to fix anything, honey. They want to feel better about themselves. That's not the same." And she was right. I wasn't angry because they wanted to be part of my life again. I was angry because they only wanted to on their terms. After all the damage was done, when the consequences started to hurt. They hadn't reached out when I was sleeping on a friend's couch, trying to rebuild my life. They hadn't cared when I opened my first restaurant and quietly succeeded without them. They only came around when they saw me on TV, when success made me valuable again. Now that I'd reconnected with Emily, the daughter they helped keep from me, they couldn't stand being on the outside. But here's the thing, forgiveness doesn't mean re-entry. It doesn't mean you get access just because you say the right words too late. I told Emily she didn't owe them anything. They kept you from the truth. If you want to talk to them one day, that's your choice. But don't let guilt be the reason. She understood. She said she needed time, and I told her I'd support whatever she decided. Later that week, I drafted an email to my parents. It wasn't cruel, but it was clear. Emily is an adult now, and she will decide who she wants in her life. As for me, I'm not ready to forgive what you did. I may never be. Please stop trying to go through her to get to me. Respect her boundaries, respect mine. I hit send, then sat back, exhaling deeply. It didn't fix everything. It didn't erase the years, but it was a boundary. And sometimes boundaries are how healing begins. Not just for me, but for Emily too. Because the truth is, the past doesn't get to write our future unless we let it, and I wasn't letting it anymore. A week after I sent that final email to my parents, I received something unexpected. A letter, not an email, a physical letter, handwritten, in my father's handwriting. It arrived in a plain white envelope, no return address, just my name carefully written on the front. For a moment, I debated throwing it out, but something told me I needed to read it. Not for him, for me. I sat on the edge of my bed, the house quiet around me. Sarah had taken our son out for the afternoon. It was just me, the letter, and 20 years of unspoken words. It started simple. "Son, I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but I hope you'll at least read this." He went on for pages. His handwriting, once bold and sharp, now trembled, like time had finally weighed on him. He didn't make excuses, not many anyway. He admitted he was afraid back then, afraid of his older brother, of losing the family business, of losing face. But most of all, he wrote about guilt, how it ate at him, how he watched my interviews, my rise, my family, and knew he had failed me as a father, as a man. I betrayed you when you needed me most. I stood by and watched your heart get broken, and I said nothing. I told myself I was protecting the family. But what kind of father protects everyone but his own son? I read the letter slowly, every word like a stone dropped in a still pond. I've watched from the sidelines all these years. I saw you rebuild your life, I saw your strength, and I hated myself for not being there when you needed someone. I was a coward. I still am, maybe, but I hope before I leave this world, I can at least say that I told you the truth, that I said I was sorry, that I told you I'm proud of the man you became, not because of us, but in spite of us. By the time I finished, I was shaking. I didn't cry. Not yet, but I felt something shift. It wasn't forgiveness, not fully, but it was something close to release. Later that evening, I sat with Sarah on the porch. I handed her the letter. She read it silently, eyes flickering across the pages. When she was done, she leaned her head on my shoulder. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. Part of me wants to throw it in a drawer and forget it, but another part feels like maybe this was the first real thing he's done in decades. "You don't have to decide tonight," she said. "You've carried this pain for 20 years. You're allowed to take your time." I nodded, grateful for her patience, for the way she never rushed me through healing. The next morning, I shared the letter with Emily. She read it quietly, her brow furrowed, lips pressed tight. When she finished, she set it down and looked at me. "I don't know if I can ever trust them," she said, "but I do believe they regret it." "I do too," I said softly. "But regret isn't always enough." She reached across the table and took my hand. "We're not them. We get to do better." And in that moment, I realized maybe that's what this journey had been about all along, not fixing what was broken, but building something new from the wreckage, together, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. A month had passed since I received my father's letter. I hadn't written back, not out of spite, but because some wounds don't close with a few lines on paper. Still, something had softened in me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a quieter anger, a steadying calm. It wasn't about them anymore. It was about me, about my family, about Emily. One Friday evening, Emily called. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with something deeper. "Dad," she said, hesitating, "I think I'm ready." "To what?" I asked, my heart skipping. "To come meet everyone again." My wife looked up from the couch, our son nestled against her side, building Lego towers. She smiled when she heard me say, "We'd love that." We flew her in that weekend. No cameras, no public announcement, no Instagram post, just us, just family. When I saw her walking out of the terminal, I noticed she was wearing the same leather jacket she'd worn during our first meeting, a little worn at the cuffs, but still holding her together. We embraced in silence. She smelled like vanilla and cold air, and when she hugged me back, she held on longer than she had the first time. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "You don't have to," I said. "We'll figure it out together." That weekend, we did everything that never got to happen when she was younger. She cooked pancakes with her little brother, who couldn't stop calling her Em like he'd known her his whole life. They played video games, built snowmen, and even argued over the last slice of pizza. It was loud and messy and real, and for the first time in years, my house felt complete. That Sunday night, we sat around the dinner table. Sarah had made roast chicken with garlic mashed potatoes, Emily's favorite, she'd said. I looked around the table, and for a moment I saw what could have been if the truth hadn't been buried for 2 decades. But I didn't let grief take over, because what mattered was now. Halfway through dinner, Emily said, "I want to ask you something. Anything. Do you think we can start again, like really start again? I know I'm 20 now, and I've lived a life without you in it, but I'd like to, I don't know, include you moving forward." I set my fork down. My hands shook. I'd like that more than anything. That night, when I walked past her guest room, the door was cracked. I peeked in and saw her sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling through old photo albums we'd printed just for her. She was crying. Quiet, small sobs. I didn't interrupt. Some pain has to be met alone. But she wasn't alone anymore. The next morning, I woke to a note on the kitchen table, her handwriting neat and small. Thank you for giving me a space to breathe, to feel, and to be seen. I may have been born into lies, but I've found truth here. I love you, Dad. I stood there in the morning light, coffee in hand, tears on my cheeks, because for the first time in 20 years, I felt whole. This wasn't about revenge or justice. It was about love. Messy, raw, healing love. The kind that doesn't ask for perfection, only presence. My family may have shattered the past, but Emily and I, we built something stronger, something honest, something new.